Celestial Reminders. My name is Daniel Vallis, and welcome to our channel. Luke 21:28. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up, and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. And this is one thing we've been studying lately, is the whole concept of Christ told us when we see prophetic events coming together, particularly ones he specifically told us to be on the lookout for. We will have an idea when we should expect our redemption, and we should be able to look up before he comes, and we should be able to see the story of our redemption. We should be able to see reminders of our redemption. We should be able to see things that lead us on the tapestry of redemption, to study it more and learn more about it, but also that we will be able to see celestial events telling us that our redemption is drawing nigh. Time is counting down. Jesus wants us to be able to look up when we see prophetic events coming together and be able to see the story of our redemption that the heavens declare, reminding us and also showing us a time frame drawing smaller and smaller and smaller. We've been looking at different celestial signs lately telling us this is the time. In context with geopolitical events in the last generation, we see things coming together on a ground level that forces us to look up and to lift up our heads, and then we see confirmation in the heavens, the story of our redemption being rehearsed to remind us. But we also see in the celestial clock timing that tells us that time is drawing shorter and shorter, and we have an expectation that our redemption is drawing nigh. We will be able to tell a timetable when we look up and look into the celestial heavens. We will see things that remind us of so many parts of our redemption: the story, the meaning, and the timing. But we will miss all this if we do not look up. And this is why we need to look up and study and investigate and diligently seek him. And there's a great reward for those who diligently seek him. And so we've been on this learning journey, looking into the heavens, looking at these reminder signs. There's a lot of celestial signs that are just reminders, but also things that we are told to look for and be on the watch for, such as the peace and safety warnings and all that. There's going to be a lot of things telling us that we need to be looking up, and that we will see things when we look up. The more we are familiar with the story of redemption and the tapestry of redemption, the more we will recognize what is being declared in the heavens. And so when we look on the timeline right now, and again it is updated on the Google Drive, definitely download it. You'll be able to read it a whole lot better there and study it. But we see where we are right now on the 20th, 21st. And we also see the approximate end of the third watch coming up in a few days, on February 9th. But there's so many other things that we've been observing on our learning journey, just like the wise men. And we've been on the journey for just under a year and 7 months so far, approximately the same time as the wise men's journey. They were looking for celestial signs. They were looking up. They were looking for the story of redemption in the heavens. And they had things to guide them with the scepter star and everything. We are doing the same thing because we are looking for him to come the second time and pick up his purchased possession. Christ wants us to look up, and we see the sign of the Son of Man going on right now. It's just started, still in the early stages of it. Still has a lot before the complete picture is fulfilled. We also see the sign of SHILOH going on. And we also see in a few days, around February 6th is about when it's going to peak. It's going to be at station 1 for approximately 2 weeks time, and that's just when it visually appears to stop. But that's also when it changes direction and switches to the retrograde motion. Right now it's been going in prograde, but it's going to be going into retrograde. So this is a significant celestial point, just astronomically, when it is coming to a pause and a standstill over these few days here, 2 weeks around February 6th. Right at the approximate end of the third watch. So we have celestial events almost forming a visual bookend in the heavens too as well. But then we also have the peace and safety warnings going on right here too as well, coming to a 12-month marker around this time. We've seen different events back around December 24th was one major one we saw with Syria, and then we saw several events this year too, also putting out a very strong message of peace and safety and peace and security. And I was looking on the archives of our radar from last year, and so I saw several events that went up through the first week of February last year. And so that's why I'm also putting a 12-month marker here. There were some events in this time frame that also put out a call for peace and safety. They were very similar to it. Last year was the War and Peace. It was a very big production, got a lot of attention by Hollywood too as well. But the phrase war and peace, that is similar in the sense to peace and safety, because that's the whole context of peace and safety, or peace and security. War is the absence of that. So in a way, it's a veiled reference to peace and safety. And when we look on an old radar from this time last year in January and December, they were airing the BBC's War and Peace for almost all of January up through the first week in February. And then in the US, they showed it toward the last half. And so time-wise, we're in that same time where they were still putting out that message very similar to peace and safety, or the lack thereof. And it's at the same time of all the Jonas events that were going on, the natural events, the calendar events, but also enemy activity. And like we mentioned, there's a lot of enemy messaging in it. They are aware of it, and some of the events and the naming and all that is certainly contrived and controlled to a degree. So they are using that as a reminder more than anything. And so we just keep that in mind when we consider the peace and safety sign that is ongoing. We heard major parts of the message, and that reminds us of the Jonah story with Nineveh. Nineveh was told they were going to be destroyed. Sudden destruction was coming. And that affected how they lived when they knew that it was coming. Likewise, we have been told the prophetic warnings of peace and safety to listen for when they say it. We're supposed to be watching what the enemy is up to, because they know the prophetic time as well. But sudden destruction is coming. Whether we acknowledge the peace and safety signs or not, sudden destruction is still coming. And the enemy knows it's coming. And they're working it into their plan with the Phoenix plan and the whole Phoenix concept. They're going to rise up out of the ashes of that sudden destruction. And they're also the ones who cause this sudden destruction. But it should catch our attention that right here around the approximate end of the third watch is also the approximate end of the January-February first week, when they were still showing that final veiled reference to peace and safety with the war and peace. And so that is coming to a 12-month marker at the same time too, and at the same time as this year's commemorations of the fast of Jonah and Nineveh. Now what else is going on? In the news today was the USA Trump inauguration. Of course, he was constantly reminding the crowd who he was really allegiant to. And we've definitely talked about him before. He is not on the up and up. We've talked about recently a lot of the push that they know the time, and it's the time for the phoenix and the palm and the whole rising from the ashes concept. They know a particular time, and we've already talked about all this messaging before. It goes with the arches concept from Palmyra, the city of palms, the bride of the desert. They know this is a certain time, and they know things are wrapping up, and their Jesuit-selected puppet is now in place. But that's going to be leading up to Phoenix events. Those are going to be happening very soon. That will usher in their Nimrod-type figure. So it was very interesting today that Sabine sent me this news that Palmyra is in the news again. Today, the same day as their palm puppet taking office, the Islamic State executes 12 civilians in Palmyra on charges of supporting Syrian regime. And of course, Palmyra has recently been recaptured by ISIS, and they're still battling them there. But again, bringing focus to Palmyra, at the same time a Palmyra puppet is being given a lot of focus to. They know these Phoenix events are coming together. But then also in the news, what they also did was they destroyed a tetrapylon monument in Palmyra. And this is practically right next to the theater where they had the executions. And a tetrapylon is a type of monument that is built on crossroads. And we've seen a lot of that emphasis lately. Crossings, crossroads, places of crossing. We are at a place of crossing. There are about to be some significant Jericho events. There's about to be a crossing over to the Promised Land. The enemy knows what time it is. They know this is a point of crossing. And we've also talked before about how Virgo has long been recognized as holding two particular branches, holding the grain and the wheat in her left arm, and then the palm branch in her right arm. And how the stars that are west of Spica, and Spica is the one right here, so the stars west of Spica have been associated with the palm branches. And this is where we are right now, about right here somewhere. And so They are expecting, in a sense, events to transpire in the palm branch, in the phoenix section on the celestial clock. And then, picture-wise, the stars that are part of Virgo on the east side of Spica are considered part of the wheat. Very interesting how a lot of the enemy messaging is with the celestial clock, matching up with it. They know what time it is, and they also know phoenix events will happen in this time frame too as well. Remember, there's still several more months that Jupiter's going to be in this area. And when we look back on the timeline, what else is going on today? Well, the reading for this Sabbath also includes Isaiah 9, 6 through 7, which, we've covered that before, is all about the promised Redeemer, the promised Son of Man who would come one day. That is being read at this time too. We have a reminder right here of our Redeemer. Right when we should be looking up for our redemption, another reminder on top of all the other reminders we have going on now, reminding us of the promised Son of Man who would be our Redeemer. And we talked about before how the disciples fully understood this prophetic passage, Isaiah 9, 6 through 7, in context with Isaiah 7:14 as the sign of the Son of Man. And when Jesus told them the sign of the Son of Man would appear in heaven after events, and then there would be events that follow it, they knew exactly what prophetic sign and event he was talking about and who it was talking about, and that it was not talking about the church. The disciples understood full well that it was talking about Emmanuel, the man-child who would rule all nations with a rod of iron. Only one person will rule all nations. And they were very keen on understanding when Jesus told them it would happen after certain events that were prerequisite, and there were going to be other events that immediately followed that sign of the Son of Man. And we've talked about this before, and we have it in the SHILOH booklet. It all goes together. Christ told his disciples when he'd be coming during the days of Noah and Lot. And during this time, we're going to be hearing warning calls and cue cards of peace and safety when they say peace and safety. And that means that then, very next sequence after that prerequisite, then sudden destruction is coming as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. We should fully expect this sudden destruction to take place in a celestial time on the celestial clock, where a sign is even emphasizing that and underscoring that. And Jesus told his disciples that the sign of the Son of Man would appear after, and then there's going to be tribulation events that will happen first. That's part of the sudden destruction that's going to come on the world. And then, it's a prerequisite. These events will happen first. These tribulation judgment seals will happen first, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And they knew what that meant. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and the tribulation wraps up. And then. There is a certain sequence that Jesus clearly told us would be prerequisite to these signs. And so to understand the signs that are going on here, you have to understand what's going to be happening before it reaches September 23rd. And then that is a sign to the world that he's coming in 3.5 years, which follows the John the Baptist messaging, behold the Lamb of God, and how he was going to be riding into Jerusalem 3.5 years later. There is a sequence of events that Christ told his disciples these would go in. And so where we are right now, we have heard the calls for peace and safety. We know we are in the days of Noah and Lot, while life is still going on like normal. No sudden destruction has come to the world. And so we are expecting our redemption to happen during this time. We are expecting the evacuation and the fallback. The evacuation to happen during this time, and then sudden destruction is going to come on the world, and then after those events, then the sign of the Son of Man. And then later he will ride into Jerusalem as King of Kings who will rule all nations with a rod of iron. And so when we look back on the calendar here, we have all these reminders of what time it is. Things we are told to listen for, things that we would see begin to come to pass and come together. Reminding us that we need to be looking up right now, looking for signs of redemption and looking for our Redeemer. Just recently we had the almond tree just a few days ago reminding us we really need to be waking up right now. We really need to be watching and expecting our Redeemer to return, and especially because it is late. And when it is late at night, we do get tired and we are weary, yes. But we need to be especially vigilant during this time. We need to be sober and we need to be watching, looking up. Now, we see we're at a 12-month marker for multiple events coming together. The redemption month that happened last year, when we were reminded that there was a certain time when atonement money was collected, the redemption money was collected. So we're coming up to the 12 months when that was brought to our attention, and then also the 12-month mark from the fast vessel. The celestial events we were looking at a year and 7 months ago, pointing us toward this event here. And that mark of that major event, which really helped a lot click together, and that's where we really noticed the Shiloh sign too, that 12-month marker is coming up then as well. But then right now we have the sign of Jonas going on, and again that's quote sign of Jonas. It's mainly by the enemy. They have their messaging that goes with it, and a lot of the events are down here on the earth and easily contrived through different means. But they are putting out a message. They know sudden destruction is coming. They are they who are going to cause it and put out the messaging. They know it's coming. And so we're at a 1-year mark for that warning as well, which goes with the peace and safety that we were told to listen for. But it caught my attention, and some of the commenters and Laban pointed out some things that caused more study and investigation. The enemy last year was putting out the messaging of Jonas, the actor, with a movie called Goat, and it was airing at the Sundance Film Festival all during these Jonas events last year. And so that's why we know the enemy's hand is very strong in this, is it took a lot of pre-planning to pull all that together and to make it happen with that timing. There is a choreography that the enemy has as well. When we talked about the movie then, the main actor is Jonas, the character there in the middle. And it's all about college debauchery and drinking, which goes with the whole name of the movie, which is Goat, which is Pan. That's who the enemy sees the goat as, Pan. But a very disturbing film, and they were airing it for a week during this time at the Sundance Film Festival, based on a very interesting book, Goat. And again, that was airing during this time, but it was at the same time as a celestial event that was going on when the sun entered Capricornus. And this is astronomy, it's not astrology. There's a difference between Capricornus and Capricorn. Capricornus is the name of a constellation, the fish goat. And they were airing this, the timing of it was exactly at the exact same day that the sun entered Capricornus. When the sun was pointing to the fish goat in the heavens, they were signaling the goat as well in connection with Jonas and the signs of Jonas going on. They know sun destruction is coming. They know panic, pandemonium is coming. You see, they look at the celestial events from a different perspective than we do as Christians, and they have their own distortions and counterfeits. And so they are following the same signs, but they have a different perspective, and only a few people at the higher up really know the true meaning of what they represent in their circles. But they know fully what time it is in the celestial clock that's going on. And so this was last year at this exact same time, January 21st, 22nd. And it's at the same time when the 5 visible planets were seen. There were major celestial events that were happening at this time. Venus had just become the morning star. Comet Catalina made its close approach on the 17th. So this was a very interesting time, and it caught our attention with the celestial signs of, whoa, this is not normal. We need to pay attention to all this. And we were observing the astronomical constellations, just some of the meaning that was being pointed to at the constellations along the ecliptic, considering the signs of redemption. And so we have to keep all this in mind. The enemy knows judgment is coming. The enemy knows sudden destruction is coming. They know Pan and pandemonium is coming. They are expecting it from their perspective. And so they're warning their disciples about it. They're also mocking Christians who are asleep and not vigilant and not watching and not diligently seeking, not looking up for the tapestry of redemption or for the Redeemer. They know full well that sudden destruction is coming, and they can mock the world with signs of Jonas even, using that exact same picture of what is coming as a message to the disciples of what is coming, and also at the same time pointing subtly to the celestial signs that point to a timing that they are aware of as well. And see, that all goes with understanding the time and seeing we are at a 12-month marker for multiple major things, particularly peace and safety, which they also put out the messaging for. And the sign of Jonas, and particularly the Jonas goat, was hedged with the final vestiges of the peace and safety, with the war and peace. And so their messaging goes together. They know there's a certain time that's going to be running out and that sudden destruction is going to be following. And here we are, 12 months later, right in the thick of warnings that they put out, knowing that we're running out of time. There's an expected time when the Redeemer is expected to arrive back in. And his servants are told to be watching and waiting for him in that time period. And we've talked about the sign of Jonas, how it's a reminder sign. It's a sign that reminds them and us of things relating to whales and great fish and the story of Nineveh, but also repentance and that judgment was coming. There was judgment. But how the sign was primarily for hypocrites. And Jesus told them, you basically were ignoring the signs I already gave you, and I'm standing right in front of you, and you still choose not to acknowledge me. The only sign you're going to get is the sign of Jonas, and it's going to be after the fact, because you ignored the signs you've already been given. In Matthew 16:1, the Pharisees also with the Sadducees came and tempting desired him that he would show them a sign from heaven. He answered and said unto them, When it is evening, ye say, It will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and lowering. O ye hypocrites! Ye can discern the face of the sky, can ye not discern the signs of the times? A wicked and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall no sign be given unto it but the sign of the prophet Jonas. And he left them and departed. They were hypocrites. He called them hypocrites straight up. They wanted to see a sign in heaven. And they were ignoring the signs that were only a few inches and feet away from them. They missed so many other celestial signs that they were aware of, but they did not pay heed to it. And he told them, you can observe signs about the weather, and you're missing some of the greatest signs that the Bible even tells you about standing right in front of you. That's a hypocrite. You know the Bible says all this. You heard that these events had been going on with Herod and the wise men. You know and heard about the miracles. And so he told them that they would not be given a sign but the sign of the prophet Jonas. The only sign that they were going to see and really acknowledge would be after the fact. It'd be the sign of the prophet Jonas. He was going to give them a sign, but it wasn't going to be the sign that they were expecting. And it wasn't going to be when they expected either. And so this is a sober warning for us today too as well. There are going to be things that are coming up that will be seen in hindsight by the hypocrites who do not pay attention to it now. Christ tells us to look up and to watch and to diligently seek and to be ready. And if we're not looking up, if we're not watching, if we're not making ourselves ready, we're going to be found just like Lot's wife. Not looking up, but looking back. Let's not be found looking back. Let's not be found turning away from the signs of what we need to be doing. Because when those signs do come, they will be seen at a time when it is too late. Now notice that they wanted to see a sign from heaven. And he told them that they weren't going to be given a sign except for this one particular sign that they would recognize later. But it should catch our attention, the connection with a sign from heaven and the sign of Jonas. Particularly as we see reminder signs of these same lessons and parallels. We are told in Luke 21:28 to look up and to lift up our heads. And that will help us get an idea that our redemption is drawing nigh, that we are running out of time. We will be able to tell by looking at celestial events, whether that's the sign of Shiloh and the sign of the Son of Man. We will see prophetic events coming together that give us an idea that we are running out of time if we are looking up. There are going to be celestial messages in the heavens that tell us all these things. And so when we remember that last year the sun entered the constellation Capricornus, and that relates to the fish goat. And this was right at this time, January 20th, 21st. And then it was going to be in that constellation for a number of days after that. And there are celestial signs then too as well. But we're at a 12-month marker right now of the sun entering the constellation Capricornus. We are coming full circle to some important messages that are declared in the heavens. So let's look at this. When we look at that area of the sky, there is Aquarius, the water bearer, which represents the one who gives the living water. And there's Capricornus, which is the fish goat. And it's been known long history, all the way back to the Babylonians, that it was a fish goat. And they really don't have a good explanation of why it's a fish goat or where that came from. They just acknowledge that it's long been recognized that that's what it was. But it's very interesting from a Christian perspective when we consider what is the goat in the story of redemption. We can look up and see the story of our redemption. So what is the goat for Christians? What does the Bible say about the goat in the story of redemption? Well, it goes back to the Day of Atonement that the deceivers don't want to tell you about. The Day of Atonement is all about the sacrificial goat who was slain for atonement. Remember, there are two goats on the Day of Atonement. One was sacrificed, the other one was set free. There are so many powerful messages in the Day of Atonement that are missed, and you do not understand the story of redemption if you don't acknowledge that it even took place. The Day of Atonement was fulfilled, and this is crucial to understanding our Redeemer and understanding when our redemption is returning. We are looking for patterns that are in this day. The atonement goat, the sacrificial goat. And this is key to understanding the Lord's Supper too. This do ye as oft as ye drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as ye eat this bread and drink this cup, ye do show the Lord's death till he come. He was our Passover lamb. We were passed over and redeemed through that. But the final completion of that story, the blood that was shed, which is commemorated by the cup, that, Hebrews 9 tells us, was fulfilling the Day of Atonement picture, when that blood was taken before the mercy seat. The whole reason the blood that was shed at Passover pays our atonement and we are redeemed is because that blood was accepted at the mercy seat on our behalf, which is the Day of Atonement picture. And so, by seeing the goat story in the heavens, we are reminded of the other aspect that goes with the Passover lamb. Christ is the lamb, but he's also the atonement goat too as well. And the Bible tells us we will be able to look up and we will be able to tell that our redemption draweth nigh. We'll be able to see elements and reminders in the celestial heavens reminding us of all aspects of our redemption. And if you ignore certain aspects of our redemption, you're going to miss some pretty big portions of the signs. You're going to misunderstand so much. We are told to look up and look for the signs of our redemption. Not a birth or anything like that. No, look for the signs of our redemption. Look for the signs that led to our adoption. That's what we're looking for. That's what's going to cause us to lift up our heads, because we are expecting our Redeemer, the one who has adopted us, to return. And we've been studying the story of the celestial heavens that's being rehearsed right now too. The choreography with the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the sign of the Son of Man, the Redeemer, the promised Lamb of God who would spring out of Judah. We've been studying so much already, but at the same time we see this sign going on with Jupiter pointing to this story and how those signs go together. You have to understand both those together. At the same time we see that going on, we also see on the other side of the sky, which is interesting because the Day of Atonement's on the other side of the calendar from Passover. We see on January 20th, where we are right now, is when the sun is entering by modern borders the constellation Capricornus, the fish goat, which represents the atoning goat sacrifice who died for the fishes. We are the fishes. Remember, Christ and his disciples, he made them fishers of men. We are likened to the fishes, the goat who died for the fish. And it's also right next to the water bearer who bears the living water as well. And incredible pictures. This whole area of the sky is equated with the waters, by the way, too, because there's the fish goat, the water bearer, and then Pisces is right over there too as well. But then also take notice that there's a big fish right down here. And that's another long historical recognized constellation. It's not on the ecliptic like Capricornus and Aquarius and Pisces. It's just below the ecliptic, So it's not one of the 12, but it is connected to Aquarius, the water bearer. It's part of the same. It's also known as Pisces Austrinus. And it goes way back. In Greek mythology, this constellation was known as the Great Fish. In Egyptian mythology, this fish. And Pisces Austrinus originated with the Babylonian constellation simply known as the fish. So a long history going way back, all the major constellations recognized and acknowledged this was the fish, this was the great fish. And particularly, there's one star that's known for Fomalhaut, which is, the star's traditional name derives from Fomalhaut from scientific Arabic, the mouth of the southern fish, literally the mouth of the whale. Does this remind you of anything in Scripture, any story in Scripture? The whale, the great fish that swallowed somebody. Fomalhaut is the star associated with the mouth of the whale. So when we look back on the celestial heavens right now, when we look up, and this whole event's taking place during the day, you won't be able to see it because the sun's there, but just simple knowledge of astronomy, you know where the sun's at. It's pointing to these celestial reminders. Reminders of the living water and our redeeming goat. And also the great fish, the whale. Now, the sun entered Capricornus on January 20th by modern constellation boundaries. It's in that area. It's pointing to that area. But the sun is going to be in this whole area, this whole series of stories up until February 22nd, and that's when it's going to be in line with Fomalhaut, the mouth of the fish. And so when we consider, what has the enemy been pointing to? They've been pointing to the sign of Jonas, reminders of it, but also at the same time, goat, the pan, from their perspective. They know we're at a time where they are expecting pandemonium and sudden destruction with the peace and safety warnings. And they know celestially that's tied with a picture of the sign of Jonas, the great fish, the great whale who swallowed somebody. Very interesting that we see this celestial sign when we look up, synced to the events that are going down on earth. When we watch the enemy, what they are doing, we see them acknowledging it. But then we also look up and we see the sign of our redemption, the Day of Atonement and the goat. And we see the living water. And we see the great fish reminding us that sudden destruction is coming too as well. The stories and parallels of the sign of Jonas. So the sun is right now in Capricornus. It's going to be in there. But on February 7th is when it's going to be in line with the tail of the fish, the great fish, the whale, if you want to call it that too. And then February 22nd is when it's going to be in line with the mouth of the fish. So that entire time is really going to be pointed to specifically by the sun, although you could say a little broader than that too. But February 7th, that's around the time of the end of the third watch. Very interesting, that catches our attention. Over the next few days and weeks, the celestial heavens are pointing to multiple things. Pointing to our redemption, also pointing to the sign of the Son of Man, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, and also pointing toward reminders of the sign of Jonas. Now, sudden destruction is prophesied to come, and we already have that expectation right now. And so when we look back on the timeline and just get a quick overview, again, the approximate end of the third watch is going to be February 9th. The fast of Jonah and Nineveh this year is at the same time as these celestial events, February 6th, 7th, and 8th. And we have reminders of other celestial signs that we have looked up and pertain to our redemption, and the sign of the Son of Man who came, and the Star of Bethlehem reminder signs. But then, keeping in mind, prophetically, we know sudden destruction is coming. We know, in a sense, there is a sign of Jonas. There is a reminder that sudden destruction is coming. We see both sides of it. We see the peace and safety warnings that lead up to it, and we also see celestial reminders of that exact same story at that exact same time in the future. When we add into the timeline the atonement goat reminder, the sun entering Capricornus, the modern constellation border approximately January 20th, which is also a 12-month marker from this event that happened last year at the same time as the sign of Jonas, that they were pointing toward Jonas and the goat. The same time the celestial heavens were doing the same. We're now at that same time again, and the heavens are doing the exact same thing. And as Christians, we look at the goat and we are reminded of our atonement, which reminds us this is the 12-month mark right here on the 29th, when last year's 12 months start, when the atonement money was collected. That's at the same window as well. A lot coming full circle. And if we just go by the Jupiter divisions at opposition, the sun would technically, by that, be entering Capricornus approximately February 8th, around that same time too. Just different things that we are considering a lot coming together here. Signs of our redemption that we can see when we look up. And then also, particularly the fish aspect, the great fish. The sun will be at the great fish and at the water bear, and at the same time it's going to be at the goat too. There's overlap here, but it's going to be reaching the tail of the fish about February 7th, and then it's going to be there at the fish through February 22nd when it's going to be at the mouth, the other end of it. So, if there was any sign of Jonas, and we can't say this is the sign because the Bible doesn't prescribe it, but it strongly reminds us of it. It's a strong celestial reminder. If there was ever a celestial sign for the sign of Jonas, this would be a very strong fit. We already can see. We know that sun destruction prophetically is in the future. We know there's a 12-month marker from major events that we saw last year of peace and safety. So it is eye-catching that a sign relating to Jonas is right at that threshold too. The sign of Jonas is for the hypocrites, remember. That's really who it's for. We could see it coming. We could see other prophetic events coming, sun destruction, and so many other things. We are reminded of our Redeemer. We are reminded of redemption. We are reminded of our bridegroom, of our beloved. We are reminded to look for him, to watch for him, to diligently seek him. We see the sign of Son of Man that also ties in with events tied to sun destruction as well. We know time is running out. We know time is running out. And it's also significant that on the 29th, the moon is going to be at the fish goat and at the great fish on the 28th and 29th of January as well. So you'll have the sun pointing at the goat, you have the moon pointing at the goat, and then the great fish. Multiple things drawing our attention. And again, keep in mind too, the sun will only move through all these constellations once every year. This is the only time the sun is going to be at the great fish for a whole nother year. And it's pointing to it right now when we're expecting sun destruction. That should catch our attention. It's pointing toward the goat, and it's not going to do so for another year. At a time we are expecting our Redeemer. We're expecting the Lion of the tribe of Judah. We are expecting the one who made atonement for us. The one who shed his blood on our behalf. Are we looking up? Are we looking up? Is it affecting how we live? We have so many signs telling us we should be rising up. We should be waking up. Definitely download our resources, Time of Perplexity, which talks about the time that will come before the Revelation 12 sign that Jesus told his disciples will happen, and then the conclusion of the sign of the Son of Man will be seen. Then the Be Ye Ready guide, a lot of preparations that Christ told his disciples of what we should be doing, knowing that he is returning. And then the Shiloh booklet, which covers a lot of information about the celestial signs. The sign of Shiloh, the Revelation 12 sign, events leading up to that, the sign of the Son of Man, and what it all points toward. Signs of the King's coming. This is what we look for when we look up. We are looking for the story of our redemption. We are looking for reminders of our redemption that tell us and give us an idea that our Redeemer is drawing nigh. And this is what those signs are going to mean in the future too as well, that the King is coming. This is what we look up for, because we are expecting him. Let us look up with our eyes, let us look up with our heart, let us look up with our life. And every man that hath this hope in him purifieth himself, even as he is pure. There is a lot we do not know, but we know this. We are expecting him, and we should live as though he is returning. Let us look for him, let us watch for him, let us lift up our heads, let us lift up our eyes, and serve Jesus Christ, first and highest above all else. Maranatha.